I got divorced mid last year, 2020. I started dating my current boyfriend, who is an absolute sweetheart. We both have a medical background working as paramedics. When we first started talking, he exaggerated when he had been working at the ambulance company. In January, my boyfriend had to go to the ER for some pretty nasty bleeding ulcers and was subsequently admitted. On my way home early that morning, I crashed my car, resulting in a lot of injuries. Somehow, my parents found out that he had exaggerated his employment with the ambulance company, and I think they may have blamed him for my car accident. I ended up being in the hospital for about a week. A lot of this time frame I don't remember because of my concussion, but I do remember some snippets. My mom started planting a lot of lies in my head when she knew I was compromised mentally. After 3 weeks, when I was discharged, I was able to talk to him and clear up all the lies my parents told me he had fed me. I realized that they had been the ones telling me lies. Now my parents have been assisting my soon-to-be ex-husband, getting false protection orders against him, and trying to get his kids taken away from me. At first, I was wavering on who I stood behind, but my parents had started coming to my apartment, stalking me and my boyfriend, making threats against his life, and overall making it to the point where I don't feel safe in my own home because I just don't know when they are going to show up and demand me to hand over my daughter, threatening to go to my ex-husband to try and get my custody taken away, and so much more. I have since cut them out of my life, blocking their numbers from my phone and making sure they have no contact with my daughter. But I still feel terrible for completely cutting them out. Am I doing the right thing? Someone, please tell me this is the right thing or I'm being a total asshole either way. Sorry for the long post. I try to put as much context in as possible, but I've never done this before. I was in a major car accident in January of 2021. This is a much more coherent post than the previous one, as I wrote that when I had just gone through a concussion and couldn't remember the details of the accident and other details well. I had been taking my boyfriend to the ER because he had bleeding ulcers and ended up getting admitted to the hospital that night. This was still when they were enforcing COVID rules, so I was booted out of the hospital at about 3 o'clock in the morning. When I left, it was snowing, and not thinking, hopped on the freeway, which wasn't a good idea. I had been driving a lifted Jeep Cherokee with mud terrain tires. Not the best ever for snowstorm driving. Getting off the freeway to go home, my brakes locked up, and I went into a light pole headfirst at about 60 miles per hour. My Jeep did not have airbags. Needless to say, my car was totaled, and I had to be extracted from the car by the fire department. This whole time I had been blacking out and losing consciousness, and I still get random flashes of that night. I don't have all my memories from that night, several months after the accident. I got sent to the nearest trauma center, which was the same hospital I had just left. The nurses felt pretty bad about kicking me out. I ended up with a moderate to severe TBI, broken under my left eye, hairline fractures on my skull on the left side, bruising behind my ears, and black eyes. I had also cut open the inside of my mouth, had multiple lacerations all over my face, broke and bruised some ribs, had hairline fractures in my spine, broke my right wrist, my right knee, and my left foot, which required 2 surgeries, and I still need approximately 3 more. Needless to say, I was not doing great. I had recently gotten divorced the previous year and think that my entitled parents decided that my accident was my boyfriend's fault. I had to stay in the hospital for a total of 12 days, in which case the mild family drama exploded into a severe family inferno. As I got closer to being released, all I had wanted to do was go home to my boyfriend and our kids. He had 2 previously, and I had 1. My entitled mother decided that wasn't what she wanted. On the phone, we sound almost identical. The whole time that I was in the hospital, she had been getting on the phone and impersonating me to my apartment complex management, even going as far as calling the cops to get my boyfriend and his 2 kids removed from my apartment. She also forged my signature on hospital paperwork and made up a story about how my boyfriend was abusive to me and got him banned from seeing me at the hospital, again forging my signature and writing a letter stating I didn't want to see him. This whole time I was still suffering from the effects of my TBI and was delirious from the combination of pain medications and brain fog from my head injury. She even had the locks changed on my apartment without my consent. When I finally was released from the hospital, I was in a wheelchair because of my broken foot that had just had 2 plates and 10 screws surgically put in to hold it together and an ankle-to-hip brace on my other leg from my knee being broken. I requested to go home to my apartment, but again EM told me that I couldn't go home because I had a second-story apartment and couldn't take care of myself. So I got sent to stay at my parents' house, against my will, an hour away from home because my mom wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to let my boyfriend come back to my apartment. I spent almost a whole miserable month there. She refused to take me home even after I got crutches and was able to bear some weight. Initially, they refused to even go get my crutches from town because they didn't want me to have more mobility. Eventually, it got to the point where I had a friend come and pick me up from my parents' house so I could go home because they kept refusing to let me go. As I gained clarity in my mind and was taken off the intense pain medication, I was able to start rectifying the situations that she made a huge mess of in my life, but I'm still trying to recover in some areas. I didn't find out until much later when medical bills started coming in that my mom had called my boyfriend's health insurance company, impersonating me, and had me removed from his insurance. It took months of calling and badgering and footwork on my part to get the situation figured out and have the insurance pay for what they were supposed to pay for. It almost caused me to go bankrupt. At the same time, Mom signed me up for minimal health insurance coverage through the state that I had no idea I was enrolled in until I got a bill later stating that I back-owed fees. Needless to say, I eventually completely cut both Mom and Dad out of life after finding out how much they tried to control and how much they messed my life up. I ended up getting protection orders after they tried to break into my house, stalked me, and sent family and friends over to harass me. This whole incident was the straw that broke the camel's back. There was quite a bit of retaliation on their side that threw my life into a total tailspin ever since, but I'm sticking to my guns and not backing down. Wow, I'm a little overwhelmed with how fast this post exploded yesterday. I was definitely not expecting that. I try to keep up with as many comments and replies as possible, but I figured this might be an easier way to answer the questions that have been thrown at me. But first off, I definitely understand those who are skeptical about my post. It's more than a little bizarre, and I'm probably not the best at describing some of the situations. But I seriously appreciate all the great advice that has been given, and I'm looking at some of the other options listed in the comments as well as what I am already doing. I guess I didn't really explain my parents. They are the kind of people that offer help and expect that you pay it back tenfold, even if you don't have the means to. Growing up, my father was extremely verbally and mentally abusive, and his tempers usually had him throwing objects at us, a lava lamp at my head, a high-heeled stiletto at my mother, etc. When I had my daughter, they were nowhere to be found, even though I desperately needed the help and suffered from severe postpartum depression. My mother-in-law came from 3 states away to help me, and when I went through my divorce, which was extremely emotionally draining like those tend to be, they were nowhere to be found again. My partner isn't perfect, but I was definitely a bitch to him, and he jumped through every hoop to make it up to me. I do agree our timeline is moving rather quickly, but he's done everything for me, including helping me pay my rent and put food on the table since I can't work yet. I think the easiest part for me to clear up is the questions about the insurance and my entitled mom getting me off of the insurance I had with my boyfriend and putting me on the state insurance without my or my boyfriend's consent. As an adult, I can call in and cancel my coverage at any time, with or without the policyholder's knowledge. There doesn't need to be a major life change in order to be taken off of a policy, usually just to get new insurance coverage or add someone to insurance. All my EM needed was the insurance information and access to my information as well as his, which she did. She already had all of my personal information, including my S number and my insurance information. This is how she signed me up for insurance coverage through the state as well. As some of you speculated, I'm sure it had something to do with the financial control she could exert over me as well as trying to totally get my boyfriend out of my life. But honestly, I will probably never get the real answers to that. The reason why I didn't get the hospital bills immediately is a pretty easy explanation. First off, my car insurance coverage included medical bill payments as well up to a certain amount of money. As well as it took weeks for them and myself to realize that while I was in the hospital, the insurance I went in with got canceled mid-hospital stay. So bills got sent out to the insurance I had to my boyfriend, which was followed by confusion from the hospital, insurance companies, and myself trying to figure out when it got cut off, what was covered, and what exactly happened. This takes time. It doesn't happen overnight. My EM did tell me eventually what she had done with my insurance and how she changed it. But by that point, it was too late and I was scrambling to try and rectify the situation and get as much covered from my hospital stay as possible. Even doing that, I still owe nearly $50 in medical bills. For those who had questions about how I had gotten on his insurance in the first place when he started the job, he had the insurance from which we had qualified as domestic partners because of how long we had been living together and how long the relationship had lasted. For everyone wondering if we went to the cops or are filing charges or anything along those lines, it's a very long story, but yes, we are. I have a very good lawyer who actually represents myself and my boyfriend. It took me a while after I got home to my apartment to get to the point where I cut contact with EM. When I finally got home, I tried to start seeing my boyfriend again, and we started the long process of trying to heal from what happened since EM had essentially kicked him and his 2 kids out of my apartment in the middle of winter. They really had nowhere else to go. The kids ended up staying with friends for a while, and he stayed in his car and rented a hotel room when possible. I wasn't fully aware of what exactly was going on at the time, as EM had my cell phone and access to my phone, and while I was at her home, she watched like a hawk to make sure that I wasn't contacting him. If I did, I got berated, screamed at, and at one point did not have access to my phone, which was all very confusing because I was on very heavy-duty pain medication, as well as having the confusion from the TBI. After I had made it back to my apartment and started to have more contact with my boyfriend, my EM escalated. Staying at my apartment even though I told her I was fine, showing up randomly, and eventually getting so angry that I refused to cut contact with my boyfriend that she threatened to kill him. That was when I grew a slight backbone and decided that it just wasn't going to get better. At that point, I filed for protection as well as my boyfriend, who copied my paperwork. When the first protection orders got dropped because we didn't have enough evidence, and this was before I had gotten smart enough to install cameras and a call recorder on my phone. My EM went to the city's prosecutor's office and told them that she wanted to press charges of perjury against my boyfriend. This is where the friendship with the prosecutor started, and it was very hard for us to get anything to stick because Ian was getting in with our local PD and the prosecutor. Yes, they ended up going after my boyfriend and not me. Yes, that is selective prosecution. Yes, it is very illegal. At this same time, they had been in contact with my boyfriend's ex-wife, and at the same time we were getting beaten down with the perjury case, they also helped my boyfriend's ex-wife's start a custody battle for his children. They had been separated for some time, but the divorce had been stalled in court for several years at this point. They also filed in small claims court for lawyer and court fees after our first protection order was removed. My ex-husband had been allowing my daughter to see both of my parents still, which I did fight and which has probably spurred the grandparents' rights case that they filed during this same time. So we have been fighting one thing at a time and collecting all of the evidence that we can. All of the hospital paperwork, especially those that were forged, had to be requested from the hospital. The phone calls to the insurance company needed to be requested, and we needed our lawyer to get those. It wasn't something they were just going to give us, unfortunately. At this point, we'd have waded through almost all of the court filings my mom had thrown at us, and we are finishing gathering out evidence so we can counterattack at this point. At the time, our lawyer was telling us to be patient and gather as much as we could, as when we get through the thick of it, we can throw what we have into the system, but we needed and wanted want to have enough to nail them to the wall. From here, there will be counter lawsuits both jointly between myself and my boyfriend and separate lawsuits, as well as submitting what we have for identity theft. It's a very long process, and it takes a lot of time, effort, and money to get things moving. For those of you wondering if me and my boyfriend got back together and how that is going, yes, we did get back together. It didn't take long for me to start realizing what was happening when I wasn't being given the heavy narcotics, and my brain started the healing process from the TBI. It did take time for me to wade through everything that happened and try and recall memories. We found a new place and moved back in together with his 2 kids and my daughter. We have had some hard times, and of course, we are both a little damaged from the whole process, but we both have counseling and are doing well. I hope this helps explain and expand on the questions everyone has been asking in the comments. Thank you so much.